you're speaking American, you're actually speaking all sorts of foreign languages that came from all sorts of immigrants. Italian, Jewish, Chinese, Spanish, you name it. But one group's contribution was largely overlooked until recently. For example, did you ever wonder why cowboys used to sing, "Get along, little dogies"? I mean, why is a cow a dogie? Did you ever wonder why we call a phony person full of baloney? Or why we call a dock worker a longshoreman? Or even a policeman a cop? Well, it turns out that all of these expressions probably arrived in America with the flood of Irish immigrants in the mid-19th century, and that they come from Gaelic, the ancient language of Ireland. For example, when you're wrestling and you start to lose, you might say, "I cry uncle." But uncle who? Have you ever heard the term cry uncle?
I'm gonna go ahead and say that uncles were generally pretty abusive back in the day. Were they really?
No. In fact, the phrase has nothing to do with the English word uncle. Instead, it comes from the Irish word for mercy, which is anachal. So to cry uncle is simply the Irish way of saying cry for mercy.
Uncle! Uncle! Have milk,
And when you say that somebody who's foolish is full of baloney, it sounds like you're referring to the sandwich meat bologna. But are you? Full of baloney.
You made it up. You don't know what you're talking about.
That's what it means now. What did it originally mean, and where do we get it?
Originally meant, that you ate too much bologna and you're full.
Sounds logical, but it turns out that the word for mouth in Gaelic is beel, and the word for foolish is ona. So in Gaelic, baloney means foolish mouth, or foolish talk. These origins were proposed in a controversial book about Ireland's contribution to our secret slang. Supporters say we simply never realized terms like this were Irish because Gaelic immigrants were mostly illiterate and didn't write things down. If so, that might explain why we never realized the Irish origin of the cowboy term, "Get along, little dogies." What does "get along, little doggie" mean? You ever heard it before?
Yeah, I have. I think that's like a cowboy term, right? Or ranchers. I don't understand why they would say doggy.
Why did cowboys call cattle dogies? Well, it turns out that the way you pronounce the word for sick calf in Gaelic, despite the crazy spelling, is dogie. And if you're wondering how cowboys picked it up, the fact is that thousands of Irish immigrants became cowboys, and Gaelic was spoken all over the frontier. Of course, most Irish Americans stayed in big eastern cities like New York and Boston, and many became dock workers, otherwise known as longshoremen, a word that sounds like it has something to do with working on the shore. Why do you think they call them longshoremen?
Well, because they work maybe long hours and they work on the shore, so maybe it's longshoremen. It's a combination of two words put together.
Good guess. But actually, it goes back to the Gaelic word for ship worker, longshore. Americans simply adopted it into our language, just like we did with dozens of other colorful Irish words, like helter-skelter, smithereens, shenanigans, even nincompoop, which comes from the Irish word for blubbering baby. But back in the 19th century, when the Irish were giving Americans a lot of words, Americans were also calling the Irish a lot of nasty names, many of which we still use today. As Catholics in a mostly Protestant America, the Irish faced a huge amount of discrimination. And Protestant Americans coined all sorts of derogatory phrases to put them down. Case in point, the term paddywagon.
You know what we call the paddywagon? Padded inside? Is that it? No.
Maybe they paddled them as they put them into the wagon. I don't know.
Good guess, but in fact, paddywagon comes from an old ethnic slur. Since Patrick is a popular Irish name, Americans put down Irish immigrants by calling them paddies. At the same time, 19th century Americans assumed that lots of criminals were Irish. And it's certainly true that huge numbers of cops were Irish. So, a paddy wagon was a wagon filled with, and driven by, paddies. if you got belligerent, people might say you got your Irish up, implying that Irishmen were violent drunks. But what about the word cop? For a long time, people believed it came from a policeman's large copper buttons, but a huge number of police were Irish, and it turns out that in Irish, the word cop means protector, or leader, or chief. So cop might well be an Irish word of respect.